Billionaire Michael Coleman had trusted his old black maid, Rebecca, for almost his entire life. She was the woman who raised him after his parents died, the one who kept his home running when he was too broken to speak, the one who called him my boy when the world only called him sir. But one cold night in New York, everything changed. His security cameras showed Rebecca leaving the mansion quietly with a hidden bag in her hands. For the first time in 20 years, doubt entered his heart. He didn't call the police, and he didn't confront her either. He simply followed her, alone, through the dark streets, keeping his headlights low, watching from a distance as the woman he once saw as family disappeared into the night. What he discovered that night didn't expose a thief. It exposed a truth so painful, so unexpected, that it would shatter everything he thought he knew about loyalty, love, and what it really means to be human. The rain had started early that morning in New York, light but steady, painting the city in slow gray. Inside the Coleman mansion, everything looked perfect. The white marble floors shined, the tall windows glowed, and the smell of fresh polish filled the air. Michael Coleman moved through the hallway quietly, his phone in one hand, reading messages from his team overseas. He was a man who liked order, a man who believed that if everything was in its right place, then life would never surprise him. At 32, Michael was one of the youngest billionaires in New York. His company, Coleman Urban Designs, had built half the city's newest projects. Everyone in business circles saw him as a man who had everything under control. But behind his calm voice and perfect suits, there was a man who had not felt warmth in years. The only person who had known his softer side was Rebecca. She had worked in his family home since he was a child. After his parents died in an accident, she became the only familiar face left in his life. She cooked for him, prayed for him, and sat by his bed during long nights when grief refused to let him sleep. She never asked for much, only that he ate well and kept his heart kind. That morning, Rebecca stood by the kitchen window, wiping her hands on her apron as the rain hit the glass. Her hair had turned gray with time, her back slightly bent from years of cleaning, but her eyes were still gentle. "Breakfast is ready, sir," she said softly as Michael entered. He gave a short nod. "Thank you, Rebecca." He sat down at the long dining table, scrolling through his tablet. Rebecca moved quietly, placing his plate before him, eggs, toast, and tea made just how he liked it. For a few minutes, there was only silence, broken by the soft clinking of cutlery. It was the same routine they had followed for years. But that day, something small changed. When Rebecca thought he wasn't looking, she slipped an extra loaf of bread into her old handbag. It was quick, careful, and quiet. Michael didn't say a word, but his eyes caught it. He frowned slightly, wondering if he had imagined it. Hours later, when he returned to his home office, his system dashboard blinked with a small red alert. The words on the screen read, "Inventory discrepancy detected." He tapped the report and saw it clearly. 3 small items missing in less than a month: food cans, antiseptic bottles, and some vitamins. It wasn't much, but Michael hated inconsistencies. He opened the security log. Only one person had accessed that area during those nights: Rebecca. He sat back slowly, his jaw tightening. His heart didn't want to believe it, but his mind could not ignore the pattern. The woman who had raised him, the one he trusted completely, had entered the storage room every night at the exact times the system marked items missing. Michael closed the tablet and leaned back in his chair. The house around him felt too quiet. The soft ticking of the wall clock echoed through the room. He could hear the faint sound of Rebecca humming from the laundry room downstairs. It was the same tune she used to sing when he was a boy. For some reason, it made his chest tighten. He walked to the large window, overlooking the garden. The rain had stopped, but the ground still glistened. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, strong, calm, but uncertain. "Why didn't you just ask me?" he whispered to himself. Later that night, he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the image of Rebecca leaving the kitchen with that extra loaf. His thoughts argued with each other. One side told him she was too kind to steal. The other said people change, and even good hearts can betray you. At 10:30, he walked quietly down the hallway. The mansion lights dimmed automatically as he passed, and the sound of rain returned faintly outside. He stopped by the security monitor room and replayed footage from the last week. On the screen, he saw her again, Rebecca, opening the storage door around the same time each night, carefully wrapping something, then leaving. Michael's hand rested on the table beside the monitor. His chest felt heavy. He didn't call security. He didn't alert anyone. He just watched. When the clock hit 11, he made up his mind. He would find out the truth himself. The next night, he waited in his car, parked just down the street from his own mansion. The lights in his home went off one by one, and the estate looked like a sleeping giant in the dark. At exactly 10:20, the side gate opened. Rebecca stepped out slowly, wearing her long gray coat and a scarf around her neck. In her hands was that same cloth bag. She looked around once, then started walking toward the bus stop. Her steps were steady, calm, as if she had done this many times. Michael started his car but kept the lights off, trailing her from a distance. The city lights reflected on wet pavement, glowing under her shoes as she crossed the street. He followed her through several blocks, from clean neighborhoods to rougher streets. The air grew colder, the buildings older, and the silence deeper. Rebecca walked with purpose, not fear. Every few minutes, she stopped to greet someone. A quiet nod here, a soft smile there. Finally, she turned down a narrow lane beside an old laundromat and entered a small building with peeling paint. Michael parked nearby and got out, pulling his coat tight. He walked slowly toward the building and peeked through the side window. What he saw froze him. Inside, Rebecca was setting out food on a long wooden table. There were children, small, tired-looking kids sitting quietly, waiting. Some wore worn jackets, others had no shoes. Rebecca opened her bag and brought out the same food that had gone missing from his mansion: canned beans, bread, and soup. She smiled gently as she served each child. "Eat slowly," she said softly. "There's enough for everyone tonight." The kids nodded, whispering thank yous. Rebecca's face glowed faintly under the yellow light, calm and full of care. Michael stood outside in silence, his breath shallow. For a long moment, he couldn't move. The truth hit him hard. She hadn't stolen for herself. She had been feeding hungry children. Still, his chest ached with confusion. Why hadn't she told him? Why did she feel she had to hide? He turned away from the window, his eyes burning, and walked slowly back to his car. The rain had started again, soft but cold. He sat behind the wheel, gripping it tightly, staring at the empty street ahead. For the first time in years, he felt something deep inside him begin to break. That night, Michael Coleman realized that sometimes the people who seem quietest carry the loudest truth. And he wasn't ready for what came next. The next morning came slowly. Sunlight slipped through the tall windows of the Coleman mansion, touching the marble floor with a soft glow. But for Michael Coleman, it was just another reminder of the night he couldn't forget. He sat at the dining table, untouched breakfast in front of him, his eyes staring at nothing. Rebecca moved quietly around him, just as she had done for years. She poured his tea, wiped the counter, and straightened the flowers in the vase. Her movements were calm, but to Michael, every sound felt heavier than before. He wanted to ask her why she had done it, where she had gone, but his voice stayed silent. When she looked at him and asked, "Is something wrong, sir?" he simply shook his head, No, Rebecca. Nothing. He lied, but inside, his thoughts refused to rest. The image of her feeding those children had burned itself into his mind. The way she smiled at them, the way they looked at her like she was their only light. It made him realize how much he didn't know about her life. He finished his tea and stood up. "I'll be working from home today," he said quietly. She nodded, not asking questions. When she left the room, Michael walked to his study and sat in front of his computer. He opened the security files again. The footage of Rebecca leaving the mansion played before him for the second time. He studied her face closely now. There was no guilt, no fear, just quiet determination. He clicked on her employment record. It was almost empty. 20 years of service, perfect performance, not a single note. No emergency contact, no mention of family. Just numbers, dates, and her signature. 20 years of loyalty, written in silence. He leaned back and rubbed his forehead. "How could I live beside someone for so long and still know nothing about them?" he whispered. Hours passed before he made up his mind. He grabbed his coat and keys, left the mansion, and drove into the city. The memory of that narrow building from last night guided him. When he reached the same street, the rain had stopped, but puddles still covered the road. The sign above the door read, "Community Youth Resource Center," letters faded and barely hanging. Michael parked nearby, stepped out, and looked through the open door. Inside, he saw the same folding tables, the same chipped walls, and the same group of children gathered around a woman he recognized too well. Rebecca stood near a stove, stirring a pot of soup, while a small boy arranged paper cups beside her. Michael's breath caught when he realized the boy looked familiar. He had Rebecca's eyes. He stepped inside quietly, his voice low. "Rebecca." She turned slowly, her face full of surprise. For a second, she looked as if her heart stopped. "Mr. Coleman," she said softly, "what are you doing here?" "I came to see for myself," he replied. The children looked up curiously. Rebecca quickly wiped her hands on her apron and walked closer. "Sir, maybe we can talk outside," she said. Michael nodded, following her out of the small building. The air was cool and damp. Rebecca folded her arms nervously, avoiding his eyes. "I know how this looks," she began. "But I didn't mean any harm. Those children, they have no one. Their parents work all night. Some of them don't eat unless they come here. I only took what was going to be thrown away." Her voice shook a little, but she didn't cry. "I would have asked, sir, but I didn't think you'd understand." Michael stood silent for a while. His voice came low. "You're right. I didn't understand. Not until last night." Rebecca's eyes lifted slightly, uncertain. "I followed you," he admitted. "I saw you feeding them. I saw everything." She froze, then sighed deeply. "Then you already know the truth. I didn't steal. I just couldn't watch them go hungry." He nodded slowly. "I know now, but it hurts me that you thought you had to hide it." Rebecca finally met his eyes. "You live in a world where everything is about numbers and reports, sir. People like me don't fit in that world. We survive quietly." Her words sank into him like stones. He looked at her tired hands, her wrinkled fingers that had cleaned his house for years without rest. "Who is that boy inside?" he asked gently. Her face softened. "That's my grandson, Leo," she said. "He lives with me. His mother, my daughter, passed away a few years ago." Michael felt something twist in his chest. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Rebecca nodded. "It's all right. God has been kind enough to give me him. He's a good boy, smart too. I bring him here after school. This place keeps him safe, and it helps me feel useful." Michael's gaze dropped to the ground. "I never knew any of this." Rebecca gave a faint smile. "You never asked, sir." The honesty in her voice cut deeper than anything. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Behind them, the sound of children laughing drifted through the cracked windows. It felt like the city around them had disappeared, leaving only truth between them. Michael finally spoke. "You won't be punished. You didn't do anything wrong. But I need you to promise me something. If you ever need help again, come to me first." She looked at him carefully. "I will, sir," she said. "But please understand, I didn't do this for pity. I did it because I know what hunger feels like." He nodded again, his voice quiet. "I understand that now." They went back inside together. The children's eyes followed them as Rebecca returned to the pot. Michael stood near the wall, watching her work. She moved differently here, lighter, freer. He realized he had never seen her look so alive. One of the kids, a small girl with messy hair, walked up to him and tugged at his sleeve. "Are you the man who owns this place?" she asked. Michael smiled faintly. "No," he said. "But maybe I can help it stay open." The girl grinned and ran back to the table. As Rebecca handed out plates, Michael looked around the small room again. The walls were cracked, the chairs mismatched, but the place was full of warmth. There was life here, something his mansion had never known. When it was time to leave, Rebecca walked him to the door. "Thank you for not being angry," she said softly. He shook his head. "I should be thanking you, Rebecca. You showed me something I forgot long ago." "What's that, sir?" she asked. "That kindness still exists," he said quietly, "even when no one's watching." Rebecca gave a small nod, her eyes shining faintly. Sometimes kindness hides where no one ever thinks to look. Michael left the center that afternoon, feeling heavier and lighter all at once. The streets of New York stretched before him, noisy and alive, but inside his chest, something had changed. For years he had lived surrounded by wealth, but that day he realized how poor his world truly was without compassion. As he drove back toward his mansion, the memory of those children stayed with him, their small hands, their quiet smiles, and Rebecca's tired but gentle voice saying, "Eat slowly." He knew this was only the beginning, and the next step would test not his money, but his heart. Because for the first time, Michael Coleman wasn't looking at a problem to solve. He was looking at people to care for. And somewhere deep inside, he was afraid of what that change would cost him next. 3 days passed after Michael Coleman's visit to the community center, but his thoughts never left that small, broken building in East New York. Every night, as he walked through his quiet mansion, the silence felt heavier than before. The ticking of the wall clock, the hum of the lights, even the sound of his own footsteps reminded him of the laughter he had heard among those hungry children. His house was full of everything money could buy, yet empty of everything that made life feel real. That evening, he sat alone in his office. Reports and messages from his company filled the screen, but he didn't read a word. Instead, his eyes stayed fixed on a single line at the top of the page. "Rebecca James, employee, no, 0217. He opened her file again, reading every small detail. Start date, 20 years ago. Emergency contact, none. Salary, steady but small. He scrolled to the bottom and saw the note section still blank. 20 years of work, and not one written word to honor her service. He leaned back in his chair, sighing deeply. For years, he had built a company on precision, on systems, on measurable results. But that night, numbers failed him. He couldn't measure what Rebecca had done for him or for those children. At that moment, a soft knock came at the door. "Come in," he said. Rebecca entered quietly, holding a tray with a cup of tea. "You've been up late all week," she said. "It's not good for your heart." He looked up, his voice softer than usual. "Thank you." She placed the tray down, ready to leave, but he stopped her. "Rebecca," he said, "can I ask you something?" She turned, cautious but polite. "Of course, sir." He hesitated, then spoke. Why didn't you ever tell me about your grandson, or your work at the center? Rebecca smiled faintly. You had your world, sir, and I had mine. You never asked, and I didn't want to bother you with my troubles. Her answer stung him quietly. Your troubles are not a bother, Rebecca. You've given me more than anyone ever has. She looked surprised, her hands twisting in front of her apron. That's kind of you to say, sir, but I was just doing my duty. No, Michael said firmly, shaking his head. You were doing much more than that. For a moment, they both stood there in silence. The light from the lamp cast a warm glow across the room. Rebecca's face, tired but strong, reminded him of someone who carried the world quietly on her back. Can I visit again? He asked suddenly. The children, the center, do you think it's all right? Rebecca blinked, then nodded slowly. They'd be happy to see you again, sir. But they don't care about names or wealth. They just want someone to listen. He smiled faintly. Then I'll listen. The next evening, Michael parked his car outside the same small building. This time, he didn't watch from afar. He stepped inside. The air smelled of soup and chalk, and the noise of laughter filled the room. Rebecca was serving food again, wearing her simple gray coat. When she saw him, she paused but smiled softly. You came, she said. I said I would, he replied. The children turned and stared at him curiously. One small boy ran up and asked, Are you the man from the mansion? Michael chuckled. I guess I am. The boy grinned and pointed at Rebecca. Miss Rebecca said you helped build tall buildings. Is that true? It is, Michael said with a nod. But none of them are as important as this place. Rebecca glanced at him, touched by the words, but she said nothing. For the next hour, Michael helped serve plates, pour juice, and clean up the tables. The children laughed every time he spilled a drop or dropped a spoon, but he didn't mind. He hadn't laughed like that in years. When the meal ended, the kids gathered around him, asking questions about the city, the buildings, and the stars. As he talked, his eyes caught sight of Leo, Rebecca's grandson, sitting quietly in the corner reading a small torn book. Michael walked over and crouched beside him. What are you reading? About space, Leo replied shyly. I like stars. They don't judge anyone. They shine for everyone the same. Michael felt a strange warmth fill his chest. That's a good way to see the world, he said softly. Do you want more books like that? Leo's face lit up. Really? Really, Michael said, smiling. I'll bring them next time. Later that night, as Rebecca closed the center, Michael helped her stack chairs. He's a smart boy, he said. She nodded with pride. He is. He gets that from his mother. She wanted to be a nurse like I was, but she got sick before she finished school. Michael froze. You were a nurse? Rebecca sighed, nodding. A long time ago. I loved that job. But one day, a patient's family complained about me touching their baby because of my color. After that, no hospital wanted to hire me again. Michael's hands tightened slightly. That's not fair. She gave a tired smile. Life isn't always fair, sir, but you learn to serve wherever you're needed. For me, that became your home. He didn't know what to say. The thought of her once being a nurse, then ending up as a maid because of someone's hate, made his stomach twist. As they stepped outside, Rebecca looked at him and said, You shouldn't feel sorry for me. I found purpose here. Those kids remind me that kindness still matters. I don't feel sorry, he said. I feel ashamed that I never knew. Rebecca's expression softened. You see now, sir. That's what counts. When Michael returned home, he walked straight to his study. He turned on his computer again, reopened the system records, and checked the inventory logs one last time. The missing items, the flags, the so-called errors, they were nothing more than human mistakes. The food had been marked for discard, the medicine near expiration, but all still safe to use. He typed a short note into the file. No theft. No violation. Human error. Resolved. Then he added one more line beneath it. Lesson learned: never assume without knowing a person's story. When he saved the file, he sat in the dark for a long time, his thoughts full of Rebecca and Leo. The next morning, Natalie Grant, his sharp and confident business partner, entered his office. "You've missed 2 meetings this week," she said, her voice firm. "The board is asking questions." Michael looked up slowly. "I've been busy," he said. "Busy?" she repeated. "Doing what?" He leaned back in his chair. "Learning about life." Natalie frowned. "This isn't a charity, Michael. It's a billion-dollar company. People rely on you to make decisions, not disappear into feelings." He studied her for a long moment. "And maybe that's the problem," he said quietly. "Maybe I've been running a company and forgetting to be human." Natalie's eyes softened a little. "Michael, this isn't you." He stood, straightened his jacket, and met her gaze. "Maybe it's finally me." As she left the office, he turned toward the window, watching the New York skyline stretch high into the clouds. For the first time in his adult life, the view didn't fill him with pride. It filled him with purpose. He knew what he had to do next. He was done building walls. It was time to build bridges. The next evening, Michael Coleman stood by his window, watching the city lights flicker like restless stars. He had made up his mind. He wasn't going to just donate a few dollars or send a fancy press release. He was going to do something that mattered, something that could not be measured by numbers. He picked up his phone and called Rebecca. When she answered, her voice sounded gentle but tired. "Good evening, sir." "Rebecca," he said quietly, "how is Leo?" "He's resting, sir. The weather has been rough on his breathing, but he's fine." Michael hesitated, then said, "Would it be all right if I stopped by tomorrow?" There was a short pause before she answered. "Of course, sir, but our home is not as fine as your mansion." "I'm not coming for fine," he said softly. "I'm coming to see you." The next day, Michael drove himself to Rebecca's apartment in East New York. The building was old, paint peeling from the walls, stairs creaking under his shoes. He climbed to the 2nd floor and knocked. When the door opened, a small boy with big eyes and a blanket around his shoulders stood there. "You must be Leo," Michael said with a small smile. The boy nodded shyly. "Are you Mr. Coleman?" "Yes, but you can just call me Michael." Leo looked surprised. "Grandma says you don't let people call you by your first name." Michael chuckled softly. "Your grandma is special." Rebecca appeared behind him, wearing a worn cardigan and holding a towel in her hand. She froze when she saw Michael at the door. "Sir, you didn't have to come all the way here." "I wanted to," he said gently. "May I come in?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Of course!" The apartment was small but spotless. The furniture was second-hand, but it was arranged neatly. The walls were covered with family photos, drawings, and a framed certificate that caught Michael's eye. It was yellowed and old but still legible. Licensed practical nurse, State of New York. He turned to Rebecca quietly. "You were a nurse." Her smile faded slightly. "Many years ago. I lost my job when someone said they didn't want a black woman touching their baby. After that, no hospital would hire me again." Michael's chest tightened. "I'm sorry," he said softly. Rebecca shrugged gently. "Don't be, sir. Life goes where it wants. I still got to help people, even if it wasn't in a hospital." He nodded, glancing toward Leo, who was sitting on the couch with a small inhaler beside him. "Has he seen a doctor?" Rebecca sighed. "We go to the free clinic when we can. He has asthma, but medicine is expensive." Michael looked at the boy, then back at her. "Let me help." She shook her head immediately. "Sir, please, I don't want charity." "It's not charity," he said firmly. "It's what family does." Her eyes softened slightly. She didn't argue again. That evening, Michael took them both to a private hospital uptown. The doctors treated Leo with care, ran tests, and prescribed proper medication. Michael stayed through every step, sitting beside Rebecca in the waiting room, watching her wring her hands nervously. When Leo was moved to a small recovery room, Rebecca turned to him, her eyes full of mixed emotions. "Why are you doing all this for us?" Michael looked at her quietly. "Because you've done it for me all my life. I just never saw it." Rebecca lowered her head, holding back tears. "You've always been kind, sir. You just forgot how to look beyond yourself." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe you reminded me." That night, he stayed at the hospital until Leo fell asleep. Rebecca offered him a blanket. "You should go home, sir. You've done enough." He shook his head. "Not yet." She smiled gently and sat beside him in silence. For the first time in years, Michael felt at peace, just sitting still. When morning came, Leo woke up smiling. "Mr. Coleman, you stayed all night?" Michael nodded. "I told you I would." Leo grinned. "Then you're my friend now." Michael laughed softly. "I'd like that." Days later, after Leo was discharged, Michael drove them back home himself. On the way, Rebecca stared out the window quietly. "You're not the same man who left this place last week," she said. "Maybe not," he replied. "Maybe I'm finally the man I should have been all along." When they reached the apartment, Leo hugged him around the waist. "Thank you, Mr. Michael." Michael knelt down and looked at him kindly. "You just keep breathing easy, okay? That's all the thanks I need." Rebecca stood by the door, her voice calm but emotional. "You've done more than enough, sir." Michael smiled. "I'm only getting started." Over the next few weeks, Michael began visiting the community center regularly. He brought food, books, and sometimes volunteers from his company. But he never brought cameras, never gave speeches. He worked quietly beside Rebecca, helping serve meals and read stories to children. The kids began calling him Uncle Mike. It made him laugh every time. One Saturday, while cleaning up, Rebecca looked at him and said, "You know, they trust you now. That's not something money can buy." He smiled faintly. "I don't want to buy it. I want to earn it." A week later, Michael surprised her with a folder at the center. "What's this?" she asked. He opened it and showed her the papers. "It's a foundation, fully funded. You'll run it with your team. No board approvals. No sponsors trying to control it. Just help for people who need it." Rebecca stared at him in disbelief. "You're giving this to me?" "I'm not giving it to you," he said quietly. "I'm returning it to where it belongs." Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled through them. "You've changed, Michael." He nodded. "No, Rebecca. You changed me." Months later, the community center grew bigger and brighter. New books filled the shelves, hot meals were served daily, and more children came than ever before. Rebecca became known as the woman who fed not just bodies, but hearts. Then one day, she received a letter in the mail inviting her to speak at a city conference about community leadership. She thought it was a mistake. "Why would they want me?" she asked. "Because you're the reason this exists," Michael said. At first, she refused. "I'm no speaker. I'm just a maid who saw hungry children." He smiled gently. "You're more than that. You're proof that kindness can change the world." The day of the conference arrived. The room was full of professionals, reporters, and city leaders. Rebecca stepped up to the microphone with shaking hands. Michael sat quietly in the back, watching. She began softly. "I didn't come here to impress anyone. I came because someone finally asked." She paused and continued. "You don't need money to make a difference. You need a heart that listens. I once raised a boy who grew up to be a man everyone admired, but for years he didn't see me. One day he finally did, and that changed both of us." The room went silent. Then, slowly, people began to clap, not out of politeness, but out of respect. Afterward, Rebecca walked off the stage and found Michael waiting. He didn't speak. He just handed her a bouquet of white lilies. She smiled and whispered, "We did it." He shook his head gently. "No, Rebecca, you did it." That night, as the city lights glowed behind them, Michael realized something simple but powerful. Wealth could build buildings, but kindness could build souls. Rebecca had taught him that love was not loud, it was quiet service. And sometimes, the people the world overlooks are the ones holding it together. From that day, Michael Coleman never saw her as a maid again. He saw her for what she truly was, his greatest teacher. And the world she built with her kindness would never be forgotten. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that sometimes the people we overlook are the very ones who hold our world together. Rebecca was just a maid in the eyes of many, but in truth, she was a light that guided a lost man back to his humanity. Through her quiet acts of kindness, she taught Michael Coleman that real wealth isn't found in banks or tall buildings, it's found in the hearts we touch and the lives we lift. If this story moved you, tell us where you are watching from in the comments. We love to know how far our family reaches across the world. And tell us, what did you learn from Rebecca's story today? Did it remind you of someone who once showed you kindness when no one else did? Or maybe it inspired you to look closer at the people who quietly keep your life together. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share this story so more people can feel the power of compassion, forgiveness, and love. And if you want more emotional, life-changing stories like this, comment "more stories" below, and you'll be the first to get our next heartfelt story. Now tell us in the comments. 1. Who was the most touching character in this story for you? 2. What moment made you emotional the most? 3. What lesson will you carry with you from Rebecca and Michael's journey? Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again in the next emotional story.